Hi.
Hello, everybody. And I think that may be the first time I've got the intro right for a Tuesday show.
It looks so good.
So you managed to be late for your own interview. So
Tim, you always have to. You don't even let me hide my. I don't even know what you call it.
So as I said in the share I put on it, today we're interviewing Christelle, who is my co-host and who I know surprisingly little about, really, at the end of the day. The background of the show was that this all came out of a dinner party, a virtual dinner party that me, you, and April had right near the beginning of, was it April sometime, start of April?
Yeah.
And that lasted about 4 hours, and it was like the most amazing. Well, it wasn't the most amazing conversation, but it was like
Tim, don't lie.
pretty deep and interesting conversation, and there wasn't really any alcohol involved either, which was amazing.
There was no alcohol involved, and we were talking depth and hope and telling stories. And
so I said, well, why don't we do a live show, because it will be interesting for people.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's all kind of come from there. But I mean, I've only met you for about a quarter of an hour in real life this year in San Diego. Though I've known you for about 3 or 4 years on social media, on Instagram, because you were involved in publishing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, shall we start right at the beginning?
Let's start. I'm ready.
Beginning of Christelle. So where did you grow up, and what kind of background was it, and how do you think you've changed since then? I mean, what have been the major changes in your life? So start at the beginning.
Question 1A. We'll start like a Twitter chat, Tim. Tim, I grew up in San Diego, California. I was actually born in Upland. I don't usually shout that out, but here we are. I was born in Upland, California, which is very close to Long Beach. And very close to Long Beach. But at 9 months, I moved with my parents to San Diego, which this is my home. This is where my heart is. Though I have moved away a couple of times, I keep finding my way back to San Diego. It's the lifelong friendships I have here. It's family. It's palm trees. I'm not going to lie. It's
warm weather.
Warm weather. However, of course, everyone knows the cost of San Diego is ridiculous. This is somewhere that you come vacation, and it just happens to be where I grew up. So yeah, San Diego, California is where I grew up. Like I said, I did move away a couple times, once to LA for college, then once to Minneapolis, Minnesota for college, and once to Portland because work took us there at one time. So that's where I grew up. Question 1B. I don't remember the second part.
Well, the second part was just a random thing that I added in, which was like, how do you feel you've changed as a person? Well, let's say, because obviously you can't remember who you were when you were born, so that's obviously a bit too far back.
Yeah.
But let's say, when did you first? When did you go to like university or college or anything like that? Or did you did?
But okay, so here's the thing. I think we call college something different. So we do grade K through 12. Elementary school, middle school, high school.
Yeah, I mean, the whole grade thing means nothing to people in the UK. You say grade 9 or grade 12. It's like hairdressing cuts with like the trimmers they have in the UK. It's like grade 2 or whatever. So,
So
in the UK, at 16, you can do what are called A levels, and people do them at colleges, which are like higher education-y. Further education, higher education, and then further education is what we call universities and polytechnics. Okay. What did you do education-wise?
So I ended up going to Biola University. Some people are going to recognize the names that I shout out. I went to Biola University right when I graduated. Biola University is a Christian university in Los Angeles, California.
Oh,
I
okay.
went there for the radio, TV, film. It's located in Los Angeles, right on the outskirts of Los Angeles. It might even be bordering Orange County, which is between San Diego and Los Angeles, basically, but closer to Los Angeles. And so Biola University is a Christian university, went there for their radio, TV, film, public relations. Thought that one day, get this, Tim, thought one day I might have my own talk show and possibly work.
Well, yeah, it's amazing what happens, really, isn't it?
Right? I went there for two things. One was radio, TV, film, public relations. They had a mass communications degree that I absolutely loved. I ended up getting very involved in school there. I did the gospel choir, which I loved, traveled the West Coast doing gospel music, and I was their public relations coordinator for my class at the time. Was one of those things you ran for office and got that. So I did that, and that was a blast. I ended up leaving there. And that's how I ended up in the following year, Minnesota. I also had a heart for working in the inner city. I thought somehow it would correlate. And the school I ended up going to was also actually a Bible college. So I went to Bible college in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And that's where that correlation with one of our previous guests kind of came on. He had a correlation there with his parents had gone there. But I went there, one, for the inner city ministries. They were located in the inner city. I thought I was going to work doing something like that. Didn't end up doing that even until my 40s, and really enjoyed it. But went there again. They had a radio, TV, film major, communications major, and was able to get involved in some of the activities that they did around the city because it was located. I lived in the heart of, just on the outside of downtown Minneapolis, I should say. So that was the following year. I ended up getting pregnant in Bible college, and listen, we're all full of stories. We just got to get it out there. And did not end up completing Bible college there. I started working for a medical insurance company, actually. So I'm a little bit familiar with medical insurance. It's interesting how you do these things along life and learn little traits, and it kind of comes in handy later on. So I was there for a couple years, raising my now 22-year-old son, who is almost 6 feet. I think he is 6 feet tall. But I was 22 when I had him. He was a cute little blonde-haired boy, and 22 when I had him. Ended up coming back to San Diego. Again, I always find my way back here. I spent my 20s working at a church here in San Diego, doing women's ministries, raising my two young boys. After Trevor was born, I had Jared. So I did women's ministries, raised two boys, often took them with me wherever I went, whatever I was doing. And there was a time where I was doing women's ministries, working in my church, also for the region of San Diego, several churches here, and young couple living in an expensive area, very little money. I also did caretaking. So at the same time, I took care of two elderly people who were homebound, wheelchair bound. So I kind of did that while raising my boys. I always had jobs in my 20s where I could take my boys. 5 years later, we ended up in Portland, and that was to work at a high school. I found another job that I loved in Portland that was working in a seminary. I got to work with some of the most phenomenal human beings on the planet and learned so much. And I was surrounded by, you know this, Tim, I love to talk philosophy and theology. If I could do anything and enjoy anything, take me to coffee, let's sit down and talk theology and philosophy for 3 hours and I will be in heaven. So basically got to do that while I lived in Portland, work in a seminary, worked with some amazing professors who were writing books and bringing in adjuncts that I got to meet people like Brennan Manning and just some neat authors that I kind of always looked up to and enjoyed learning from. So that was my 30s. I separated in age group.
Well, I didn't ask you for the entire life. I was actually originally asking
my whole life story here.
Yeah, well, you might as well carry on now. We might as well go.
Let me get to my 40s, Tim.
Yeah.
Ended up back in San Diego. Here I am. And over the past several years, ironically, what I went to college for in the beginning, I kind of did a full circle and was finally able to work in some nonprofits here in San Diego. One was Traveling Stories, where I got to help kids fall in love with reading. We very intentionally went into areas where it was high poverty, low literacy rates. And I had a boss that pushed us to do things that we weren't quite ready for. And it was good for us. And that meant I got in front of media. I got in front of groups speaking again. And she pushed us out of our comfort zone and believed that we could do things. And I learned so much from her. And then spent a short time at a homeless shelter. Both, again, came full circle for a while. Went to university.
You weren't actually in the homeless shelter as a person. You were working there.
I was working there, but you never know. My favorite conversations were with the students that were there. My favorite times were sitting with the students and getting to know them and hearing their stories. And I always said, and it's kind of a life motto, is we're all more alike than different. And we sit down and start hearing people's stories and listening to people's stories. We realize that at any given moment, any given day, we can all be in each other's shoes, and we just don't know. And I will say, working at the shelter, talking to the students was my absolute favorite moments there. And a lot of stereotypes are broken away when we start telling stories and listening to stories. The stereotypes that we have of certain people, groups, or whatever it might be, those stereotypes aren't necessarily true. In fact, I find that they're mostly not. And everyone has a story, so we just don't know. How have I changed?
Well, not much, seemingly. You just keep doing the same sort of stuff all the time. But there's a couple of things I want to talk about there. One is the whole religious aspect. Now, obviously in the UK, we're nowhere near as religious in general as in the US. Do you think I'm pretty sure that this is the truth, but do you think your faith has changed? And what would you say to your 20-year-old self in terms of God and theology, about what you've learned in the last 20-odd years?
Wow. My faith has changed for sure. That's a good question. I'm going to ponder for a second because that's a big question for me.
Well, I can ask you the other question, but this is even more sensitive.
No, it's not sensitive.
It's not actually sensitive. It's just kind of, because I know you were in an abusive relationship and you were married at some point. So you haven't mentioned that at all. So was that for part of the period, or was it for all of it? Or, I mean, you don't have to talk too much about that if you don't want to.
Well, yeah, no, that was 20 years, more than 20 years of my life. I mean, I was in a relationship for more than 20 years of my life. I met my ex in Bible college. And so we have the intersection of my faith changing as I'm going through a period of an unhealthy relationship. And here we have an intersection of faith and unhealthiness in my own marriage. And so to answer your question, how did my faith change? I went from not questioning, because in the circles that I grew up in, we don't question. We're taught not to question. And we're taught to look to the leader of our church or organization, or even often the male figure in our life. We are taught that they are the leader and we don't question. We're taught to do as they say, and often not as they do. So I would say my faith changed. One, I started questioning. And I started learning. Another thing that I learned is that not only question everything, but also know that we don't have the answer. And I think that was a big deal here, for me to start realizing it's okay to not have an answer. It's okay to say, I don't know. And that is part of my faith. It's part of my life. Realizing that it's okay to question, it's okay to not know, and it's okay to know that people don't have the answer. So that definitely changed. I would say the divine changed for me. Some people call the divine God, some people call creator, some people call divine, some people call the divine love. I would say it changed for me because I'm okay with not knowing.
Yeah.
I'm okay with other people not knowing. I'm okay with not thinking I have a story I have to share. I'm okay with people being uncomfortable with my newfound faith, and the faith-based culture that I grew up in that wasn't okay. It was very uncomfortable. It's very fear-based.
Yeah.
It's a culture where you have to know the answer. You have to know that life is going a certain way. And how did my relationship play into that? One, I married into a family that their entire world was in a certain denomination.
Yeah.
They were the youth leaders, they were the pastors, they were the professors within that denomination. They were the people that were very much looked up to, highly regarded, very well esteemed, educated within that system. And, and I would say that's another thing, you get educated within a certain system and you don't have anything else to hold on to or learn from. It's this one system, and that's the right way. And so you start opening up books outside of that one system and start learning other things. And that's scary for people still in the system. And I started doing that. I started hanging out with people. I caution when I talk about this because I don't want to be belittling anyway, but I started hanging out with people that you're not supposed to hang out with in those cultures. I started learning about people. I started getting to know people. And again, I would say the biggest thing that I have learned over the past years is how we are more alike than different. And we have no right to tell other people how they should live their lives or what they should believe. Within my own marriage, I mean, he worked in the Christian system my entire relationship with him. And so here we had behind closed doors, abuse was happening. And in front of the world and in front of those Christian systems that he worked in, they didn't necessarily know. I hid things real well. We don't want people to know what's happening behind closed doors. We're taught to wear a mask. And I think perhaps it's never good to answer for another person, but I will say, having been married to a preacher's kid, a missionary's kid, I think you're raised with that whole thing where you have to wear a mask because you have to live up to something.
Yeah.
And it happens to the rest of us that are raised in that culture, but even more so perhaps because you're raised in a world where you're brought in front of a congregation or you're brought in front of a denomination with parents saying, "Look, this is my child. Look at this." But at the same time, you're ministering to other people groups, and sometimes those people groups come before your family, and that's not a good thing. Your family should always come first.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of lost in that. And anyways, you learn to wear a mask, and leaving that marriage, one of the biggest things listen, you got to meet my therapist.
We've had the therapist on the show. If anybody missed it, it's in the YouTube channel.
We probably had a therapist on. Some of the things that I've had to work on since leaving my marriage, and this would be things that have been growth for me, and also ways that I have changed, is one of the biggest things, and this was a therapy session. So stop pretending. That was a big thing. One of my therapy sessions was actually getting rid of the pretending. And that's something that we hide behind, is pretending. And stop living the way other people expect you to live. I grew up very guilty, very shame-based, and that's kind of the climate and the culture. You walk away from the climate and the culture of that, you're kind of met with fear and guilt. And so part of my therapy and growth has been getting rid of that guilt and getting rid of that shame.
Yeah.
So there would be that. And I think finally, what does Christelle want to do? Not what do people want Christelle to do?
Yeah.
I'm learning that. And I spoke in the third person. What do I want to do? Because I've been told my entire life what I should be doing. And it's very common in the culture that I grew up in. So it took me 40 years to finally say, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to do it. And it's going to be a struggle, but that's good. The struggle is good.
Yeah. Well, I kind of appreciate, because obviously I've been through similar things. So you know what the next question is going to be, don't you?
I don't. What is it? I don't.
So what does Christelle want to do?
I want to do what I'm doing, but more. I always wanted to start my own business, and my boys and I kind of started dreaming about that before we left the situation we were in. And of course, we weren't able to do that. We left just like many people do in that situation, with no money, actually completely broke. And so we started dreaming then, and now we're in the midst of COVID. We decided to start our first entrepreneurship venture, as you know, and that's what I want to do. I want to have my own business and be able to work from home in some capacity. I wanted to write a children's book, and I did that. We're at the end stages. I hired an illustrator who we also interviewed. We're at the end stages of that, and I'm really excited. I have a hope for September for it to come out. I've kind of advertised that, but it comes down to the final illustrations. And we took time recently to change a few things, to be more aware of what was in the book, more culturally aware, and needed to change a few things at the last minute. And so there's that. I have a book coming out, and that's what I'm doing. That's what I've wanted to do for a very long time. And I want to write a book about hope eventually, about what kind of the things that we witnessed and went through, because people aren't talking about their intricate stories of abuse enough. But I don't want to focus on that. I believe that when you talk about the story and you continue to swim in it, you start to bring people in, and they have to swim with you in it as well. And that's not necessarily healthy. We have to tell our stories. That's important. But there comes a point where once we're out, we have hope, and a healthy hope. And in my case, I learned a new definition of hope. Hope isn't what I thought it was, what I was taught that it is. We cling to this thing that hope is, you believe something enough, it's going to come true. If you pray enough, that prayer will come true. It's like you're hoping for some kind of magical thing to happen, and that's not what hope is. It's, you learn that life is going to continue, and your hope is in, I think, humanity. Your hope is in yourself. Your hope is in the common goodness and kindness of the universe. Hope changes a lot. And in stepping out of my previous situation, and now my hope is in showing my boys that they can be more than that. They don't have to fall into a trap of being stuck in anything. And that, yes, you know what? We're going to fail, and that's good. We're going to fail, and that's healthy. We're going to make mistakes, and that's healthy. But what we learn from that is, one, we get stronger, and two, we keep going and we keep pushing. And so what am I doing now? I'm learning through this new adventure of entrepreneurship and writing, and knowing I'm going to make mistakes, and showing my boys that that's okay. And we don't have to hide our mistakes, and we don't have to pretend. Yeah. What else am I doing? I something that I've always wanted to do as well, which I originally went to college for, was work in the nonprofit sector or charity sector. we're put on this planet, I think, to help each other as a community. We're all community. And I want to do that through entrepreneurship. I want to be able to give back. So one of the things I'm doing now in this new venture of mine is for every purchase made, give $1 back to organizations that help people who have been in domestic violence situations. So that's one way that I would like to do that. And I'm open and willing to tell my story now and hopefully bring hope to survivors, people who have stepped out of that situation, and bring resources to people that are still in that situation, because it's very challenging. To get people free from that environment can get dangerous real fast. And so that takes a whole other system, and people are equipped to do that. And I don't believe I'll be involved in that kind of thing, but I do want to be able to raise awareness, help with that situation, and then bring hope by telling my story. So that's what I want to do.
Well, given that I've already gone through all the personal stuff, I might as well carry on. Obviously, your romantic situation has improved over the last, I don't know, year or so. There's a man up north in the UK who I understand that you've got some sort of relationship with. How on earth did that happen? It's kind of like your boyfriend is up north in the UK in Hartlepool.
How are you all these people in the United Kingdom? Where are you coming from? It's like,
well, I mean, I'm just curious. I mean, did you meet him at a conference or something, or was he kind of were you like surfing the net looking for people up in the north? I mean, how did that happen?
Was I looking for people in the UK specifically? No. I knew you were going to ask this question. I actually planned for this. Hi, James. I know he's watching. I saw him put the watch party on. I met James because we both blog. We both follow similar, theologians online. I don't really know how you want to call it. And we both kind of follow the same type of people on Twitter. So we ended up meeting on Twitter. Go figure. I did that whole, we met on Twitter, and we chatted for some time, and we were just friends. And eventually we saw that we had a lot in common. And I was like, oh, I think I like him. And
me, you, how about it?
Hashtag, I think I like you. How is it going to go? You know what? James is a compassionate and kind person. And he's very wise.
Yeah.
And he likes to learn as much as I do. Actually, probably more. He likes to ask questions. He stretches my questioning by when I do ask the questions, and when I think I know something, he'll ask more questions to get me to ponder. Doesn't pretend to know the answer, and I really like that about him. Besides the fact that he just loves people, and so that's what drew me to him. He loves to read. That drew me to him. As you know, I'm an avid reader, and he's a blogger. He likes to write, so that was attractive to me. He likes to help the underdog, if you like to say. And again, I don't usually like to say those kind of words, but he definitely likes to be a voice, or raise awareness of voices that need to be heard, I should say.
What's wrong with the word underdog? It's not something that we problem with.
No, I know. I don't want to belittle people, because again, we're all humanity, and so I try to be thoughtful in how I word and phrase things, because we're all the same here. But yeah, so I met him on Twitter, and eventually we became friends. And eventually I said, James, I like you. What do you think about that?
Well, you have met. I've seen photographs of you together. It's not like he's.
Met him in person, we have met up. We met up. Yeah, we've met up, and we had plans to meet up, and of course, COVID has changed that for us. So that, ironically, it's forced us to really get to know each other even more. I think, because here we are sitting in front of a screen talking to each other every day, and we didn't do that small talk of what's your favorite food. We went immediately into who are you, And what does that mean to you? And what does life mean to you? And what is hope to you? And tell me your world life philosophy.
Did he get a word in edgeway at all? When you're interrogating the poor guy.
We did a lot. Oh no, he asked back, yeah. And we did a lot of laughing. We did a lot of depth. We did crying. We did jokes, and I learned some British terms that I didn't know. I mean, it's funny, as you know, we start talking sometimes and communicating, and you realize you're both speaking English, but you might not be speaking the same English. And so you learn to communicate and say, wait a minute, I don't think we're talking about the same thing. But, suddenly I found myself surrounded by a lot of really neat British people, including you, Tim, and some others. So
why do you think that is? You've got local friends as well. I mean, you do get on with people in California and the rest of the US, but why do you think you have ended up gravitating to talking to so many English people, or British people, I suppose it should be clear?
on the one hand, I want to say, I don't know. It just happened. And on the other hand, there is a part of me that believes that it's so important to talk to people outside of your world. And I'm not sure that that's why necessarily, but I do want to say, in the United States, we, for some reason, are trapped in this bubble. We only get to know the people that are closest to us. And we have this mindset of this worldview that is the United States. And there's an entire world out there. And it's so important for us to start hearing stories outside the United States, so we know we're not the only people on this planet. And what is life like outside this planet? I mean, you start talking words like freedom and, I don't know, other things, even talk about our current situations, and you realize the worldview is not the same as wherever it is that we're living. And I think that's important. So I do gravitate towards talking to people who have other mindsets so I can learn, and I'm challenged and learn that, again, we're not the only people on this planet. We can learn from each other, and I think that's so important. It's so important to have a broader worldview. And I could make this spiritual. I mean, we're all one.
So you become a Buddhist, basically.
Become what?
A Buddhist.
A Buddhist. We're all one. They have some beautiful.
That's not really fair to Buddhism. I mean, this was one of the things that I think is interesting about the UK as opposed to the US. Yeah. I'm not sure if it's so true now, but we did like religious studies, and we studied like all the religions. It wasn't just Christianity. But in my mum's day, all they studied was Christianity and religious studies at school. But we did like Buddhism and Hinduism and all the rest of the other religions, which is quite interesting, really.
I find it absolutely fascinating. If you ever want to talk religion with me, I think it's beautiful. I love the meditations and the prayers of the Buddhist faith. I love how they believe that we're all one. I mean, I love the commonality in each faith that believes in love your neighbor. They say it a different way, but that's there in every faith. Love your neighbor, take care of your neighbor. I love that. I love going into depth about that. I love the beauty of faith and religion when it means taking care of each other. And every faith has the bad sides and the downsides, but there's beauty found in every faith too. And so many of us were raised to believe that our faith is the ultimate faith, and don't look at them because there's nothing good that can come out of them. And that's not true. You sit down and have dinner with people. We sit down and have dinner at the table with people and start telling stories, and we realize, again, at the end of the day, we want to take care of our families. At the end of the day, we want to love each other. At the end of the day, we hope for what's best for those who are closest to us. And that's what makes us all alike. Yeah. And it's not by accident that common theme of love your neighbor is in every single faith group. And so I think, going back to your previous question, even that, because faith is such a big part of most cultures, and it varies between cultures. That when we have a chance to sit down at the table, and it's funny because this was part of my foodie venture too. In my foodie venture, my motto was gather at the table, tell stories, and at the end of the day, you're going to find out you're more alike than different.
So let's talk about food, baby.
Let's talk about food, baby.
Because obviously you were a low-grade food influencer person at one. Well, like, tell us what, like, you were involved in food and you were big on social media, and I know you've moved away and you've moved sideways and you've done all, so just talk about that.
As I was learning social media and I was writing for a local blog, part of what I did was shine lights on local businesses.
Yeah.
And something that I really, really enjoyed doing was going on food adventures with my boys. Yeah. And going into the local mom and pop shops, the restaurants that maybe most people didn't know about, very locally owned in the areas of town that people maybe didn't venture out to. I enjoyed taking my boys on what I called food adventures. And so as I was writing for the blog and kind of shining lights on different parts of San Diego, I thought, you know what, I'm going to start doing this on my own with food. And I'm already doing it. So let's just see what happens. So I started my own Instagram because Instagram is kind of where the foodies are. Yeah. And I tend to learn as I go. I'm super ADHD. You can tell me all you want, a million things, but I have to jump in. And so I jumped in and I started going to restaurants, and eventually I would meet the owners. Again, they were small restaurants in San Diego, bringing my boys, taking them to try all kinds of foods throughout San Diego. Now, to get from the border, South San Diego, which is the border of Mexico and the United States, all the way to northern San Diego, it can take an hour and a half. That's how big San Diego is. So there's a lot of restaurants and places that people don't venture to within the entire surrounding area of San Diego. So it started with me just taking my boys and having fun. And then I would, because I was writing for a local blog, I would kind of put together articles, the 5 best acai restaurants to try, acai bowls, or the 5 best places to go with kids for coffee, or the 5 best oyster joints or happy hours. That kind of wove its way in. And eventually, once you kind of start being looked at as an influencer, which I would love to talk about that, as you start being looked at as an influencer, restaurants and other businesses will start inviting you to be part of their ventures. And so I started getting invited to restaurants to try out foods. And then I started a women's group of foodies so that we could go together and celebrate locally owned restaurants. So that was fun. And one of those foodies was Judy, who was on that we interviewed last
week. Yeah.
So fun. And she taught me a lot about other kinds of foods that I had never known. So I did a women's group for quite some time, and that was a blast. We got to go as a group. And as an influencer, when you go as a group to a restaurant, it means more eyes are on that restaurant. So that was part of the food venture. After leaving my relationship, I had to completely dive into healing, taking care of my boys, and really, really like, this is it. I didn't have time to do what I was doing with the foodie thing. And that's kind of why you saw me take a step away from then until now. But it's been a couple years. I still have those relationships. I built a lot of friendships. Yeah. And you end up kind of hanging out with those food influencers, and it's a lot of fun. Every time you're invited to a restaurant together, it's like a big party, but you're all taking pictures of the same food and you all get each other because nobody's eating yet. Like you go to the restaurant, everybody knows to wait 30 minutes. Your food is going to be cold. It's okay. But I built some great relationships here locally. And so that was my food adventure. And I still have those relationships. None of us are going to restaurants much anymore. So although support your local restaurant, I will say that. Support your local restaurants by eating takeout if you're not able to go to restaurants still. Gosh, our local restaurants took a big hit in the midst of this COVID crisis. So do what you can to support locally. I'm putting the a little word out there. But we tried to do that in the midst of COVID a little bit here with my own family. But yeah. So there's my food adventure story.
Food adventures.
Yeah.
So let's talk about travel. Clearly, at the moment, you're a little bit, well, we're all a little bit limited into where we can travel, but let's say 2021.
Yeah.
Where do you want to go in the world? I mean, there's obviously one obvious place, but beyond that, where are your travel ambitions in the globe, and why?
Why? My travel ambition obviously is to get to the UK because I have so many friends, and one of my favorite people, my lover, is there. I want to get to the UK, number one, and Scotland, Ireland. That would be number one. Aside from that,
Scotland is in the UK.
I know. And you know what's funny is you asked me why I'm surrounded by all these people from the UK. Again, my illustrator is in Scotland. He's not Scottish, but he lives in Scotland. I don't know. At some point, the universe brings you all together, and you start meeting the right people. So I want to meet him as well, and his girlfriend, and make that part of my book tour, a mini book tour of some sort. I want him to be involved in that because he has helped tell this story as much as I have, if not. We're very much equal in that. So those are my first destinations. Aside from that, I've always wanted to go to Thailand for the people, for the beauty, for the food. It's so much different than the United States. I want to learn about their culture, their religion. I want to talk to people. I want to sit at the table and tell stories. Thailand is on my list. Vietnam is on my list. I think maybe because I've read so many books about Vietnam, I just want to get there. Same reason as Thailand. Where else do I want to go? Greece. I want to go to Greece. Same reasons. I would like to go to Jerusalem, the Middle East. So many stories that I'm told that I want to see for myself. I want to talk to people. I want to get to know them. I want to eat the food with people. I want to hear stories. I want to go down to, I've been to Mexico, closest to San Diego, but I want to go farther into South America. Mexico City, maybe. I want to see their culture too. I want to see the pyramids down there. I want to hear the stories. I want to learn the history. I am such a history buff. I'm such an ancient history buff. I want to go anywhere that I can learn more ancient history and dive into that. And of course, America has that too. Our ancient history would be learning our native history.
Yeah.
And I did dive into that at one point. I did this thing early in my university years where I had actually not done so well with some of my classes. I do very well with history. And so I did this thing where I needed to get my GPA up, and I just did a history binge, and I kept taking history classes. And so a lot of my travels are based on kind of what I learned in history. If I can go and learn some history, if I can go eat, if I can meet some people, if I might know people there and they can kind of show me the local areas. There's very few places that I probably don't want to go. And Tim, you traveled a lot. I mean, you're kind of...
Well, I do and I don't. I mean, I do in the US, but and I've traveled a lot in Europe. With my late wife, we traveled a lot around Europe. We never got to the US, ironically. We're only going to go to New York at some point, but that never happened. Yeah.
And I'm going to interview you at some point. We're going to hear your story. I think September.
Well, that may happen sooner than you think, because next week's show have had to rearrange, so I may swap that.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
So that makes sense that you will be interviewing me next week, unless things change in the schedule. So
I can't wait. There's so much to learn from you too, Tim. You have some stories, you have books you've written, you have books to be written, you've traveled. So yes, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, well, there's stuff to learn from everybody. I mean, I'm of the opinion, every now and then you do find somebody who is really boring and done nothing. But even people who have done nothing, usually have something they can talk about. It's just finding whatever the topic is that they know something about, and they like you find the right conversation, and then it's like the conversation flows.
Yeah, that's true. What's interesting to you? Who are you? What does that mean? Absolutely.
So talking about interesting stuff, I mean, I've watched this guy's YouTube videos about like all the stations, and I know you're a fan of the guy.
Yeah.
Jeff Marshall, I think is the guy's name.
Jeff and Vicky, but okay, ask me the question. Okay.
But it's like, well, why? I mean, it's like the most obscure YouTuber who does UK videos about UK train lines and the tube and stuff about London. Because I think that's a Londonist channel as well. And it's like, yeah, it makes sense for me to like that because I live in London. I've travelled on a lot of it. I like railways. But for you, it's a bit, because you were kind of like, oh, should we ask him on the show? And I'm like, oh, yeah, we could. I'm like, well, how do you know the guy?
First of all, I don't know him. First of all, let's plug them big time because I'm a big fan of who they are and the fun stories they tell and the adventures they go on together. I think that as a couple, they're adorable. I think I love them because they're so down to earth and they're just who they are. And I think maybe that's why I'm such a big fan of the UK, because you at least who I'm meeting, there's no pretentious. Is that the word I'm trying to say? You're not pretentious people. You're who you are. And I'm attracted to that. And that's who they are. Jeff and Vicky are just who they are. And as someone who wants to adventure, I love that. But how the heck did I start following them? Tim, I'm dating someone from the UK who loves trains and train stations.
So it was kind of like, oh, shall we watch a romantic video? No, let's watch this YouTube video about tube.
You know, we both love to watch stories, and neither of us watch TV.
Yeah.
We tend to watch things that are really happening on YouTube, things like that. And so his like is all the stations, and I have other interests on YouTube, but that's how all the stations came about. He just said, yeah, I like trains, I like adventure, and he asked me if I would want to watch all the stations with him. We started watching together and ended up becoming a date night for us. So when you're dating someone that far away, you have to make date nights really interesting, and that became a date night for us to watch something that's calming and fun and an adventure, and allowed me to see the UK from their perspective.
It's all it's got, because they visited every station in the UK, haven't they? Every train station.
Yeah.
And I know he's done like loads of stuff about every tube line. I mean, I think must be running out of stuff to do because they've just visited everywhere. But
I think they did. I think what they did is they raised money, and were able to raise enough money to do this however long adventure that it took them to, I think it was 3 months actually.
Yeah.
To do the entire UK, every train station in the UK, although I believe that maybe a few have been built since then. I might be off, but they were able to raise enough money to do that. And so it's fascinating. And me loving adventure and me loving to see places that I've never been, it gave me a way to do that. And so doing something.
I mean, there is a certain charm to the mundane. It was like when I was in the US last September, and this is after I formally announced I was going to try and do this 50 states challenge. Mm-hmm. And I was in Boston, and I kind of thought, because Boston is the most ridiculously good place for trying to get states, because it's on a rail network and it's got loads of tiny states right next to it. And I thought, well, am I going to try and do this? So I went on the Amtrak site and I booked a ticket the next day to go to Portland in Maine, which was absolutely stupid idea, to be honest, in hindsight, because it was just too far away. But yeah, I spent a fair amount of time in that holiday sitting on US station platforms, which are very different from UK ones. and there is a certain charm about it. Certainly in hindsight, at the time, I was thinking this is the most boring place I've ever been. When I was in New Hampshire, having to wait for a train and everything was shut. Yeah, I can see the attraction in many ways of the whole, and certainly the UK has a way more stations than the US in terms of service anyway.
Yeah, well, and here on the West Coast, where I live, you can take the train all the way up the West Coast and have a beautiful view for much of the ride. I mean, you have, at least through San Diego, and I haven't taken it the whole way, but I do know that you can see the ocean view for a very large part of your trip. I mean, I would love to start from San Diego and go all the way up to Washington on the train. I actually did take the train from Portland, Oregon, all the way to Wisconsin at one time, which took us to Montana. And I mean, that's more than half of the United States. I took the train with my 2 little boys that entire trip. And I actually wish I had taken pictures. I didn't think about it with my boys. And so that was 2 overnight stays on the train, on the train, and did that whole venture. So trains can be fun. I mean, you see things that you wouldn't normally see, and you're able to see it faster. You're able to see the land on the train. So,
well, I'm hoping that particular line stays open, because apparently Amtrak are talking about shutting some of these lines down, and I'm not sure that the COVID thing is going to help in terms of shutting the US rail links down.
I know.
Because that's one of my great ways of doing all the northern states, like Montana, etc.
Oh gosh, Montana's
huge. Geographically, Montana's enormous.
It's huge, but it's Glacier Park that you have to get to, the surrounding areas. And I went through there very, very fast. I drove through there very fast, and that's somewhere that I would have loved to have stayed a couple days, because you just can't see it. The things that are there, the animals, the beauty, it's gorgeous. Hiking, I mean, it's just beautiful. And it's something that's kind of overlooked when you come to the United States. Where do you want to go? You want to go to LA, you want to go to New York, all those kind of obvious places, San Francisco, maybe Chicago, but some of our national parks are absolutely gorgeous, and I would highly recommend going to.
I mean, the only trouble about your national parks is a real pain in the neck to get to if you're not a driver.
That's true.
I mean, I've been looking at how to try and get to Yellowstone, and it's possible, but it's a bit hard.
Yeah.
Because you have to fly to these like obscure regional airports, and they only fly to like Denver and Salt Lake City. So. Yeah, that's something I'll
have to rent a car and then
when and if the world opens up again, assuming there's anything left of the US.
No one's letting the US go anywhere, nor should they. And so
this massive dumpster fire across the ocean is the US at the moment.
I know.
Anyway, I thought of an interesting question that you can probably ask me next week, and I'll forget that I asked you. Okay. But if you had to say your top 5 guests that you would like to interview on this show, for people who are still alive now, none of this, like, we're not having like people from the who are dead or spirit or fictional characters. Who would be the 5 people you would want to interview on this show if you guarantee they said yes? Okay,
we're dreaming here. Do you remember when I did that Twitter talk about the 3 people you'd love to have to dinner? Yeah. I included you in that never, and it went on and on and on and on to people had to like mute because it just kept going. Okay, dreaming, though this is dreaming. First I'm going to say, and because he's watching, I want James to come on because he's very wise and brilliant. And if someday he'll come on and
I'll keep messaging him. Well, I say I can't message him twice, to be fair. That counts as keep messaging to say, come on. I've got a booking calendar.
He has so much to share because of his heart for humanity. And I hope he does come on to share about community and humanity and just what he does for a living, because it's very interesting. That would be number 1. Aside from that, dreaming, it would be fun to bring on Jeff and Vicky. Yeah. I would love to have them on. They could tell us about their travels and the adventures they've gone on. And Vicky loves Harry Potter, so that would be fun. Okay, so let's dream even bigger. Let's dream bigger. The Bishop Desmond Tutu. Does anyone out there know Bishop Desmond Tutu? Because
he's still alive.
He's still alive. I want to meet him. I don't have much time.
Yeah.
He wrote a book with the Dalai Lama, and their friendship. Okay, I might have more people on. If we could get Desmond and the Dalai Lama on together.
Well, we can get them on together. Yeah, that would make sure.
I want to have a conversation with them. They wrote a book together. If you see the two of those human beings together in person, their conversations with each other, they become like, there's something magical about children and their energy, and they become like that without being immature. You just see the beauty of childhood, joy in their hearts. They're so cute together. I love them. So the Bishop Desmond Tutu, the Dalai Lama together. If anyone knows them.
Well, you're expecting rumors they're together now, are you? That's a bit progressive.
No, they have a cute friendship that we can all learn from.
Yeah.
People of two different faiths and two different cultures and spreading joy. And then I bought their book. Finally bought their book that I'm still making my way through. The Pursuit of Joy, or something about joy. Let's all have joy. joy. And then, I would love to interview Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
Again, we don't have much time, but that president and his work on world peace. And, once upon a time, many years ago, there was a little boy who had, I believe it was muscular dystrophy. I can't quite remember, but he had this passion for Jimmy Carter, and he wrote a book about his passion for peace and what Jimmy Carter taught him. And interestingly enough, that child ended up passing away, but it was that child who kind of turned me on to watching more of what Jimmy Carter has done for not only the United States, but the entire world. And it's someone that we can all look up to because of his heart and his passion for faith and peace. And we need more voices like him. And I would love, love, love to sit down at the table with him and be able to chat with him. And finally, I have to say, I look up so much to Michelle Obama for so many reasons. She's a woman of strength. She was able to live a life of integrity with her husband while they were in the White House. She still is. She stands as a woman who stands right next to her husband. They are equals in their relationship. She wants to raise other women up. She's written a beautiful book. She has a podcast now where she interviewed her husband first. I love their relationship. I love what she stands for. I love that she's a builder of humanity and women. So Michelle would be someone as well. And you know what? I could go on and on. I mean, but let's start with them. 1,000.
Well, I think some of them are possible. Others are a bit more. We might have to get seanced eventually to get someone.
Yeah. You know what? Can I throw someone else out there? When I was going through a lot of hardship, I read books by Ayanla Van Zant. I might be pronouncing her name wrong. And she had her own show for a while, but she wrote books because of what she went through. And the reason I was buying them, though, was they were about forgiveness. She's a truth speaker. And she's like a no BS kind of person. And in order to live a life of truth, again, you have to cut through that pretending and you have to speak truth. No, that's not what happens. Let's talk about you. Let's cut through the BS and get around the mask. And we're not going to heal unless we do that. We want to heal. We want to be stronger. And so I started kind of watching her and reading all her books. So I would say Ayanla Van Zant would be another person I would love to interview. And she's United States. And I look.
You can't have everything, can you?
No, I know. I look up to her a lot too. Oh, I have someone else. Last, I'll leave it with this. The leader of New Zealand. Do you have any ties to her, Tim?
No, strangely enough, I don't. Do you know what her name is? I can I
want to ask her so many questions, and I've watched her leadership in the midst of COVID. I would like to chat with her. So, yeah, there we go.
Well, that's good. So that's nicely used up almost the hour.
I'll ask you next week. That same question.
I was just thinking in the back of my mind. One thing I would say, like to waffle it over the hour a little bit, but the Jimmy Carter Presidential Museum is very interesting, actually, because I mean he was like in the Navy. He was quite big in the Navy. Was Jimmy Carter? He was in the submarine. This is what you actually find out from visiting these presidential museums: is the weird stuff that people did before they were presidents. Obviously, a lot of the 20th century ones were involved in the military in some way or other.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was a naval commander before he ended up in Congress, I think.
It's only recently that our presidents didn't serve in the military. This is only recent, and so yeah, I'm not surprised that he did.
Yeah.
And ironically, he's such a man that stands for peace. I mean, and he's still building houses he's in his 90s. And he's not just saying, let's be part of community and let's help each other. He's out there in his 90s helping build houses for Habitat for Humanity and doing what he says and doing it and showing us that. So yeah, he's someone.
Well, I mean, the whole thing, the biggest thing, you can argue about Jimmy Carter's leadership style. The trouble was the time he was in, he was just basically the wrong person at the wrong time. But he did manage to broker peace between Israel and Egypt, which is amazing if you think about it. Like, nobody else has come anywhere near to any kind of peace in the Middle East at all, and yet he managed to have it, and that peace has held. I'm not sure if Egypt actually recognizes Israel as a country, but they at least there's no talk of ever of Egypt invading Israel and vice versa. Israel has like everybody else around there, but not Egypt. So that is an amazing achievement, and he's never really ever got. Everybody forgets about it. I forgot about it until I went to his president.
Yeah, they forget about him. And the irony is, he was actually president when I was born.
Yeah.
And so he was the first. Who's your president?
I don't think you can claim credit for that.
I would like to.
Well, unless there's something you really want to. Your real surname is Carter.
No, I didn't start studying him. I didn't start really watching him until I was in my mid-20s, like the story I told. And as I started watching him and reading one of his books and learning about him and realizing what he did as president and after, I wish more people would watch his legacy, because he is someone we can learn from. And yeah, you can learn from everyone, but like you said, he's been overlooked because he's a pacifist. And sometimes we look over the pacifists because they're not they don't come across as those big personality kind of people. I'm a leader. But to me, that humble leadership there can be a lot to be said for that. And there can be a lot to be learned from a humble peacemaker. And to me, that's true. That's a testament to character.
So you've got a crush on Jimmy Carter, but so it's the whole thing with James, isn't it? It's like the whole name James. It's just not people called James. I don't know. Anyway, I suppose we should end the show, which involves me having to remember what I have to do on the end part of the show now. We didn't get any comments at all, and I'm not sure if that's StreamYard or if that's the fact that we were really boring. He's probably on the watch party.
Come on, Tim. I'm not boring. Let's you raise me up.
The illegal watch party that was going on in the UK. That's probably got 30,000 people in it. There's probably no social distancing on the watch party. So.
It's scary to ask questions when you're in the midst of such this is kind of a little bit of an intense interview. Yeah.
We're going to try and change up the Thursday show if I get my act together, which is
I'm excited.
And have segments, not just the quiz, which will hopefully be a regular thing, but eventually we might have mini guest episodes and various other bits.
Well, we do have New King coming on.
Yes, that's not this week, next week.
Next week. That's going to be good. Really good. We'll talk about catfishing and digital dating and good. So
we will see everybody on Thursday.
Bye. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, people, for watching.
Thank you, Christelle, for being a wonderful guest. I always forget the whole thank you thing. I just get anxiety about what button do I press now?
I'll do the thank yous. And next Tuesday, I'm going to be interviewing Tim, and I'm excited. He has some beautiful stories to share with us. As we close.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Goodbye.
This is terrifying for me.
I've made more money in the last 3 years than I did in the previous 7.
Cliche shit, you know.